Hey everybody, welcome back. Last video we were talking about installing this transmission, which went very smooth. We just got it tightened up a little bit. I'm waiting on some parts for it to come in, and in the meantime I got the frame scuffed down on this side on all the parts that were a little bit of surface rust on them, and put some primer on them, and then got this wire loom on this side ran back up to the front. The parts I'm waiting for are the transmission cooler lines, which go right there and they run out to the front. So I'm kind of held up. I need to put the starter in, and then after the starter, right underneath that is where the oil filter housing goes. And I started in the front here, and I took apart this fan pulley bracket right there where it was cracked, and it took a pretty good hit. Well, this obviously took a really good hit, but what I came to find out afterwards was the vacuum pump that sits right next to it. I took the cover off. It had a dent in the cover. Not a terrible dent, but enough that apparently it blew up the mechanisms inside that make it go. So another one of those are on order. And but in the meantime, I came up with this little bit of an issue right here. I'm trying to get it a little closer, and found that one of the ears is cracked. But in trying to figure out what I'm going to do with this, there were two options. One is try to braze that, but it's cast aluminum, so there's kind of hit or miss on whether how well it was going to be welded back up, or what it was going to turn out to be. And I really don't want to replace this, because after replacing the upper oil pan, this front part of it here sticks out, and I'd actually have to take this out, take everything off the front, clean that back up, and put that back in, and that's just really not something I'm looking forward to doing. So after looking at it and talking to a couple people, I realized that this hole, and I don't know if you could see inside there, but the threads for that hole are way down deep inside. So I took and I measured with the bolt and realized that, I don't know if you could see it, but the threads are actually into the block, into the cast iron. So what I'm going to do is clean this area up really well, and I'll take the Dremel, get it down to some good, clean, bright metal, and then I'm going to JB weld it. And that's not the ideal way that I would do this normally, but because of the way that it is and the situation, and realistically, if you look at the new bracket right here, with the mounting points here, there, and there, there's really not a lot of pressure on it. And once you get that piece in place, it should sandwich this little chunk into against the block there. So once I get the vacuum pump in, then I'll put this other piece back on, but I'll be cleaning that up and working to get it fixed. So the other pieces are, what I'm going to be working on right now is these lines. So this piece sits right on the front of the upper oil housing, or I'm sorry, upper oil pan, and these two lines go back and forth between the two batteries across both sides of the engine. So I noticed that all of them were flattened to the point. This one, when I checked it, it came right apart. So I'm going to be splicing just a new piece in from here to here. I didn't have the same gauge as this one, and I did this one last night. Didn't get it on video, but I soldered it, put some heat shrink on it. I'm going to wrap that with tape and then do the same for all of them. Looks like the battery cables, even though they're flattened, they're not poked through anywhere. So I'll clean those up, wrap those with tape, and then I'll wrap everything with tape and get that up back in the same area. And just a minute, I'll get set up here and show you what I'm going to do for soldering it in. Okay, so I got my piece prepped. I cut the wire just a little bit longer than the part that I cut out, and I have a good mechanical bond here between the old wire and the new wire, and the solder that I'm providing will provide some conductivity, but having that good mechanical bond in the beginning will ensure that there shouldn't be any problems in the future. So I just tinned my soldering iron a little bit. So I modified my setup just a little bit. I ended up doing the same thing basically in soldering back over here, but all I had was heat shrink that was a little bit bigger than what I wanted and ran out of the smaller stuff. So I ended up taking one of these, and a lot of people use just this. I'm hesitant to trust them, but what they are is a little piece of solder in the center, and these ones on the end, when heated, will seal the ends as well. So this is about the size of the heat shrink I wanted, which I didn't have. So in addition to doing the soldering here, I will put this on, slide it over our solder, and then attempt to find my lighter. Here it is. And last thing you want to do is be troubleshooting something years down the road for a splice that had broken later that you had repaired earlier. So with this, it seals both ends. It's supposed to be waterproof end to end. And if you didn't do the soldering in the center like I did, then that solder should hold. But like I said, I'm just a little hesitant to trust it. So what I'll do is I'll take a piece of heat shrink and go over the top of that with the larger stuff that I have, just as a precaution. I'm still going to wrap them too. So, all right, I got that all tied up. I ended up wrapping the both ends of where I spliced with black tape over the shrink wrap, the heat shrink, and then put new zip ties all through here. And I also wrapped, cleaned and wrapped the positive cable since it was dented a little bit. It wasn't coming through, but just have a little extra protection on there. So last thing I did was put this heater hose on. This goes over to the heater core onto the firewall of the truck. And yeah, that's about it for the front of this. Got it tightened up back to the oil pan there. And next thing I'll be doing is working on this front case and waiting for the vacuum pump to come in. Parts should be coming here tomorrow, and I'll be working on some other things and trying to get the cab on for this week. So I had some camera issues, otherwise I would have had some of more of this on film, but ended up getting the transmission cooler lines. The parts came finally, and they're in. They had to run from here. I had to pick the motor back up and run them back through the between the frame and the motor mount there, and back out here to the oil cooler. I ended up putting these lines on. I'm waiting for an elbow here, and what else was done? got the power steering pump buttoned up. I scuffed the frame in the back where I needed to put the new harness on. So scuffed it up, primed it, painted it, and I got the new wiring harness almost all the way to the back. I need to finish that, but I would like to get the cab on first. So got the fuel lines back on and ran out to the front, up to the fuel filter and to the fuel cooler. And what else? The exhaust went back on. I plan on doing a DPF and a DEF delete on this, but I would like to make sure it's at 0 first, just so there isn't any kind of issues, warnings, or anything that come up after that. I'd like to make sure the truck is good to go before we go ahead and modify it. So not too many other things, but we're ready to put the cab back on, and that's what's going to happen in the next video. Stay tuned.